Hi Year 11s, welcome back to Stage 1 Nutrition Protein. In this PowerPoint, we're going to explain the role and function of proteins in the human body. Role and function of proteins. The primary function of proteins is growth, maintaining and repairing body tissues. So proteins are essential for growing, maintaining and repairing our tissues of our body. They break down into amino acids, which cells use to make the necessary proteins in our bodies. From conception, proteins support the development of our bones, muscles, nerves, blood, skin, and hair. The body replaces around 3 billion cells daily to function properly, and proteins help repair tissues such as healing cuts and recovering muscles after exercise. Enzymes are catalysts. They speed up a chemical reaction in the body, such as digesting the tissues, which are the building blocks of our body, and providing energy. Each enzyme has a specific shape, which includes an active site. So this is an enzyme, and it has these little divots, which we class as active sites, and they attract a different type of protein called a substrate. So it's its matched mirrored pair to be able to bind. They fit in as like a lock and key, and they create some products. So their job is to attract their matching pair of molecules called a substrate, and they carry out their functions. The next thing they're involved on is synthesizing or making hormones. Hormones are chemical messengers that help communicate in our body. Their job is to move through the bloodstream, giving different information to our different cells. They're made by the endocrine glands and are released into our bloodstream, and the blood carries these specific hormones where they bind to receptors or molecules on the surface of their cells, almost like a telephone, triggering this response. So they're able to go connect and make a call inside of the cells. So here's a table that shows some of the hormones that we might hear about: insulin, growth hormone, thyroxine, dopamine, where they're produced. So the endocrine gland, like the pancreas for insulin, adrenaline for dopamine, and their function. So for example, insulin lowers blood glucose levels by signaling glucose to enter the cell and be used by the cell. And for example, for dopamine, it regulates mood, motivation, memory, and behavior by the signaling hormone adrenaline. Synthesizing antibodies is the next thing that's involved with proteins. These antibodies are proteins. They protect against viruses like the flu and measles, even things like COVID-19. White blood cells detect the virus and produce these matching antibodies, which are proteins. And this is through the signal of white blood cells to either create the antibodies or destroy the infection or the virus. Once made, the body remembers how to produce the antibodies fast because they keep these cells that are able to pump these antibodies out for recurring immunity. The other thing that proteins are super important for is being able to have our muscles contracting. If we didn't have contraction of muscles, we would just be this kind of pile of skin and muscle and bone on the ground. So proteins help the muscles move by using energy, which is glucose, to make actin, which is a specific muscle fiber inside, and myosin slide against each other, causing each other to contract, so almost like a spring-like mechanism. The last thing that we need to have a bit of an understanding is they're involved in transport. So proteins are in these cell membranes of our cells. So basically they're walls that keep the outside out and the inside in. These proteins are hydrophilic, so they love water, and they allow the movement of body fluids to move through to deliver nutrients. There's other proteins in our bodies, like hemoglobin, which is in our red blood cells and it carries oxygen for our lungs. And there's another ones called lipoproteins. When we talk about fats, you'll need to be able to understand this word. But they're involved in our cholesterol metabolism and helping with vitamins, while membrane proteins allow substances to enter. So these are membrane proteins. They're almost like little doors that allow things moving in and out, depending on how much energy they can provide or how much is on one side compared to the other. So now we've finished this kind of protein section, you should be able to describe the basic structure: carbons, hydrogens, oxygens, nitrogens. They contain this nitrogen bound to two hydrogens, this NH2 group. They always have a central carbon with a hydrogen attached, and these side chains that give them their 20 amino acid name. And this COOH group, or this carboxyl group, a carbonyl group, that's involved in making it an acid. You can describe the difference between essential and non-essential. So essentials are taken in by our diet, our body can't make them. Non-essentials we can make ourselves. We can identify which foods contain proteins. We can describe where proteins can be found in our diet. And we can recommend the amounts of proteins we should have in our diet. We can understand what happens when we overeat proteins or undereat proteins, so the deficiency or the overconsumption. And we can explain the many different roles and functions of proteins within our bodies. So the last thing we're doing is completing our review questions in our textbook, page 28. Here's some also additional review questions to help with this specific PowerPoint. Can we identify the primary function of the body's proteins? Explain the role of enzymes in the body and how they function, and describe how proteins assist in transport of nutrients and other substances in the body. So for example, like hemoglobin.